All right, so we're going to start with today's daf. Okay, excuse me for the delay. All right. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so today's daf yomi is Yud Ches, Nedarim Yud Ches. We're going to start on the bottom of Yud Zayin Amud Beis, where the Gemara was discussing the position of Rav Huna, where Mishnah has said that if there's a neder upon a neder, it's binding, unlike an oath upon an oath, which is not binding. And the Gemara has said that Rav Huna and Shmuel disputed, what does it mean a neder upon a neder is binding? Rav Huna had said that only means, if you say, I'll be a neder today, and then I say I'll be a neder tomorrow, that's what it's referring to. But if you didn't say that, but if you just said I'll be a neder today, then it's not binding. So the Gemara challenges Rav Huna from a brisa. Meisvei, or on the bottom of 17b. 7 lines from the bottom. Misha nazar shtei naziros. Somebody takes a vow of 2 naziros. Umanes harishon, counts off the first 30 days. V'hifresh karban, separates his sacrifice. V'nishal aleh, and then at the end of his conclusion of his naziros, he goes to the chacham, and the chacham revokes for him his first vow of naziros. And so he says, retroactively, you were never a nazir. Therefore, altolo hashniya. So therefore, it's as though he's concluded the second naziros, barishona. He's fulfilled the second vow by having fulfilled the first vow, because he had revoked the first vow. So that's the case of the Gemara. And so the Gemara says, hey, Chidami, what's the scenario? Elim, what are we talking about that you can fulfill the second vow through the first vow? If you want to say the Amar Hareini Nazir, Yom Hareini Nazir Lamachar, if you say like Rav Huna says, I'll be a Nazir for today, I'll be a Nazir for tomorrow, am I also Shnia Barishon? If they're two separate dates, why does the second set of dates work for the first one? Hayika Yomi Yasera. There's an additional day that he has to obey with the second Nazirus, so it shouldn't work. Because the second Naziros only finishes on day 31, so he wouldn't have fulfilled it by observing the first Naziros. El Pshita Damar Areni Nazir Yom Areni Nazir Yom. So it must be exactly the way Shmuel explained it, where he says, behold, I'm a Nazir today, I'm a Nazir today. And under that circumstance, it works. And so therefore, this is direct refutation of Rav Huna, the Tiyufta de Rav Huna, or on the top of 18a. Gemara says, no, no, Rav Huna would say no. We were talking about a scenario where he says, behold, I'm a Nazirite today, behold, I'm a Nazirite tomorrow. My altalo. What does it mean when it says that his Nazirus has worked? Var me'ahu yoma yasera. He says Nazirus has worked aside from that extra day. He still has one more day to do. So that's what it means. It worked, but he still has one more day to do to fulfill the second vow. Or else we're talking about a scenario where he literally accepted upon himself 2 Naziris at the same time. Like, for example, he says, Harei shtei Naziros, or he says, Hareini Nazir, if I eat this loaf of bread. And then if he says them both at the same time, then Rav Huna would admit that both of them are applicable.
Rabbi?
Then Rav Huna would admit in that case that they're both applicable. So, yes.
Isn't it possible that the second one nullifies the first one? Because it's a change. It's as if, he's changed his mind. So he's starting not the first day, but the second day.
So if the first one was there first, then what we say by an oath is that the second one can't nullify the first one. It's just that we don't take that approach. We say that the first one was done first, so the first one would have been what's fine, not the second one. So That's a nice point, but they go in the opposite direction. So the
Okay.
Gemara is still challenging Rav Huna. So Masav Rav Hamnuna asks the following challenge. It says in the verse, a man or a woman who will make a vow, Nazir Hazir, to be a Nazarite. The word Nazir Hazir is doubled. Mikansha Nazirus Chal Nazirus. This teaches us that even though you're a Nazarite, you can take another vow to be a Nazarite. Sheyachol. That if you didn't say this, so without the verse, we would have learned from a Kal V'chomer that a Nazirus does not apply to a Nazirus. Because Valodinu, Ma Shvua Chamura, Ein Shvua Chalal Shvua, just like an oath which is more severe, an oath does not apply upon another oath. Nazirus Kawa, a Nazir, which is a vow, which is more lenient, well, Kol Shekain, for sure it shouldn't apply. Talmud Omer, so therefore the verse says, Nazir Lazir, Mikanshin, Nazirus Kawa, Nazirus. That a vow can apply upon another vow. So the Gemara says, Hey Chidami, what's the scenario where we say one vow applies upon another vow? Everyone would say we're talking about a scenario where he says, behold, I'm a Nazarite today, behold, I'm a Nazarite tomorrow, like Rav Huna. Hakrabai. So do we need a verse under these circumstances to tell us that it will be applicable? It's another day, so of course it's applicable. It's not the exact same vow. Of course you'd have to count the second Nazirus. Now, it must be the Amar Areni Nazir Ayom, Areni Nazir Ayom. The Katani Nazirus Chal Nazirus. Must be we're talking about the way Shmuel said it, that even if you say, behold, I'm a Nazarite today, behold, I'm a Nazarite today, and under those circumstances, we say a Nazirus applies upon a Nazirus. This is the refutation of Rav Huna, where it says, no. Well, he says both vows at the same time by saying, behold, I have two Nazirus upon myself. And in this situation, even Rav Huna would admit that the two vows are applicable. So the Gemara says, okay, fine. But let's go back to the question you had said, that he said that it was a Kal V'chomer, that oath is more severe than a neder. My chomer the shvua min neder. Why is an oath more severe than a neder, than a vow? If you want to say maybe an oath is more severe, because an oath is applicable even on something that's not tangible, like we've said many times in this tractate, where a vow has to be done on something that's tangible. Neder nami chamor, shekein chal mitzvah kershus. A vow is also in some ways more severe because a vow applies to something that's optional and also to a mitzvah, whereas an oath does not apply to a mitzvah. It says by an oath, the reason why an oath is considered more severe than a vow, because it says by an oath, that even though the person gets lashes, he's not absolved from his sin just by his lashes. But by a neder, once you get the lashes, you're going to be absolved. The Gemara leaves that question unresolved. The Gemara goes on to the next point. The Gemara says, our Mishnah said, Shvuah shelo ochal v'achal eino chai v'ala achas. Let's say it says, an oath I'm not going to eat, an oath I'm not going to eat is only going to be liable for one set of lashes. For the first oath, but not for the second oath, because he already took such an oath. And we said an oath is not applicable upon another oath. Amarava, imnishal harishona shniya chayola. But let's say he goes to the Chacham after he said both these oaths and undoes the first oath retroactively, then the second oath will be applicable and he'll be in violation of it and he'll get lashes. Bimai. How does Rava know this law? And he learns it out from the fact that the Mishnah said, "Midolokatani eno el achas," from the fact that it doesn't state that there's only one there, which would have implied that there's only one oath, and the second oath is nothing. The katani eno chayav el achas. He's only liable once, meaning to say that the second oath is chala. He's just not liable for it, and so therefore, as a result of this, ravacho hudoleslei. It basically, since the first oath is binding, the second oath has no place to fall. But once we undo the first oath. Once we get rid of the first oath, the second oath will be binding. Gemara says, Lishna Achrina, we have an alternative version of this discussion to explain what happened, and the alternative version is as follows. Chiyuvu deleka hashavua ika. That what does Rava infer from our Mishnah? When our Mishnah says, Eino chayev ela achas, it means he's not chayev, but it's still an oath. So then if the first one is annulled, then he would be chayev. So the Gemara says, and why would the Atana need to tell us that it's an oath if you're not chayev? Look at the Rava. Also to teach us this idea that if you violated that if you annul the second oath, if you annul the first oath, the second one is binding, and you're going to get lashes for it. Let's bring a proof for Rava. Again, what has Rava said? If you revoke the first one, then the second one will be active. Somebody who made two vows to be a Nazar, and he fulfilled the first one. He separates the sacrifice. He undoes the first one. Also, the second one is going to be fulfilled through the first one. And so we see from here that when you get rid of the first one, the second one is still there. Because certainly we're going to say that this Bryce is talking about a case where he says twice, I'm a Nazarite today, I'm a Nazarite today. And so therefore, the second Nazarite-ship is right in the same days as the first one. And so therefore, if you get rid of the first one, now we're still having the second one there. And so therefore, this is the proof for what Rava said. Or says, no, we're not talking about this scenario. We could say that Bryce is talking about not where you took an oath and then you took a second oath, but at the same time, you accepted upon yourself two oaths. Could go in Shekibo of Shtei Naziris B'Ba'as Achas. At the same time, you accepted upon yourself the two oaths. Okay, we're now on the top of 18b. The Mishnah says, Stam Nedarim, if a person takes a vow, and the vow can be interpreted two ways. You can interpret it to be lenient or to be strict. Meaning to say, you can interpret it in a manner that doesn't understand it to be a vow, and therefore the vow will not be applicable. And you can interpret it to mean that the vow will be applicable. So we say, we assume lahachmir. We're going to say stam nedarim lahachmir. We're going to assume the vow is applicable. Uperusham, but when we interpret the neder afterwards, and we say we believe what he said, and we are lenient. Lahakel. So what does this mean? How is this a scenario? Mar explains. Ketzad. Scenario is Amar Harei Alai Kibasar Maliach. Let's say a person makes a vow and he says, "This is upon me like basar maliach," i.e., like this prohibited meat, or he says kiyei nesach, like this wine, which is a lashon of stam nedarim. You can interpret it in two ways, meaning to say in bishal shamayim nadar. If he wanted to, he could associate the meat with a carbon, and then it would be called basar maliach. The Torah requires us to salt the carbonos, and it's asar. In b'shal avodas kochavim nadar, but if he intended to associate it with the salted meat that they bring as an idolatrous offering, or the wine that they worship as idolatry, so then we're going to say it's mutter because he compared his meat to something that is itself a davar asur. And we already said many times that if you compare a neder, if you're matfis it to a davar asur, it's not applicable. Vimsasam asur. And if he didn't say which one it was, we're going to assume it's binding. And he compared it to to the libation and the of the carbon, and it's binding. But let's say he says, let's say he says, it's upon me like a vow, meaning to say, this is another example of a stam neder. He says it's upon me like a vow. Basically, it can mean, im kacherem shal shamayim, if this is something like was something sacrificed to heaven, like a carbon, or something donated to the temple, to the Bedek Habayis, and it'll be aser. But im kecherem shal kohanim, but if it was like the cherem of the kohanim, then it's mutter, because after you give something over to the kohanim, it becomes something that is permitted. It's like the money of the kohanim, and it's permitted to everybody like chulin. And so therefore, im sasam, if he didn't explain it, it's going to be aser. It's going to be prohibited. But what's another example of a stam neder? Harei like a meiser. If he says this is upon me like meiser, if this is upon me like a tithe, so then it could be im k'meiser behema nadar aser. If he intended to be matfasit to the meiser behema, the 10th animal that goes through the flock, then it's going to be prohibited. Mim shal goren, but if it was the meiser of the Levites that you give to the Levites 1/10, then it's mutter, because that's a davar aser. He didn't. That was something that was not a davar another, because meiser dagon is going to be considered something that you can't make another on, because it's like truma. It's considered a davar aser, and imsasam aser. And the last example of the Mishnah is as follows: Harei like a truma. If a person says this is upon me like a truma, im truma salishka. Now, if he wants to compare it to the money that you give to the temple treasury, also it's going to be prohibited, because that's a davar another. The im shal goren, if it's a truma of the kohanim, it's going to be permitted, because it's a davar aser, and the vow doesn't take effect on it. And im sasam aser. And if he wasn't clear, it's going to be prohibited. That's the position of Rabbi Meir. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Stam Truma Yehuda Asura Begalil Materis. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. And he says, if you do that fasa with Stam Truma, and you didn't say which one, if it was Truma Salishka or Truma Sagoren, in Judah it's going to be prohibited, because we're going to say that he intended to give it to the Truma Salishka. But in the Galilee, it's going to be permitted. Sheinad Shegalil Makirin as Truma Salishka, because the people in the Galilee were far from Jerusalem. And when they spoke about a truma, they meant the truma you give to the Levi, not the truma you give to the temple. Stam charamim beYehuda mutarin, begalil asurin. But on the other hand, if you have a stam chayram in Yehuda, that'll be permitted, because Yehuda is close to Jerusalem, and there's a lot of kohanim there, and we say that they know the kohanim, and they call them chayram. So it's possible that he intends to give it most likely to the kohanim, but in the Galilee, it would be prohibited. Shein Galil Makirin as Charmei Kohanim, because there's not a lot of Kohanim, and so he says Chayrim. We understand that he means to give it to Shemayim, and therefore it's a neder. Okay, we'll stop here, and my friends, wish everybody a good Shabbos.